The easiest way to start the layout for your blocks is to actually start in the block SketchUp file itself. One of the things you want to do is make sure that when you click Zoom Extents, you don't, like I have something else there. So let's make sure we get rid of that so that as we click Zoom Extents, all we see is our block. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save this. Now what I'm going to do when I'm ready to put it onto a piece of paper is I'm going to go up to File, and I have this option here called Send to Layout. When I click that, a separate piece of software called SketchUp Layout is going to open. And as it does, it's going to ask me, what kind of paper template do I want to start from? I've actually created one that is somewhere in this list. They're not quite in alphabetical order, but as you start to scroll down, you should find one that has FRMS as the title. So FRMS Letter Landscape. This is the one we're going to want to use. So we click on it so it highlights yellow and click Open. Make sure you start with the right template. It's not easy to switch back and forth. So we get this right now, which obviously is not exactly what we want. So I'm going to click on it and make sure you have the SketchUp model open in this default tray. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we click the Ortho button and make sure that is selected. Under Current Scale, scroll all the way up to where it says Full Size. This will be showing the block the actual size we drew it. The other thing I want to change is under Standard Views, I want to change from whatever it is to Front. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our front view. Now, in the same model menu, there is a View tab, which we just made all our settings for, and a Styles tab. So go ahead and click over to Styles. Right now it shows you the architectural design style because that is the only style that we currently have available. If we go to this little house menu right here and go to Styles, we can scroll down to Default Styles, which is the second one in the first column. And as we scroll down, we can find the one called Hidden Line. This is the one we're going to want to use. Go back to our view. We'll have other settings that we set here, but make sure that it says Preserve Scale on Resize, because that way you don't actually change the size of the drawing when you grab these corners. All you're doing is changing the size of the window, which we want to shrink the window up to be much closer to the size of the actual view that we have going on here. Don't cut anything off, but don't leave yourself a bunch of extra space. We're also going to position this in the lower left-hand corner of the drawing. The front view is what kind of sets the basis for everything, and it must be in this lower left-hand view. There is no choice. There is no putting it in other places. You'll see why in a moment. What I'm going to do to create my other views is I had some setup here, so I don't want to go through and make new views. I want to make copies of this and then change where we're actually looking from. So if I hold Control on the keyboard, click with my Move tool and drag straight up, I move a copy straight up. Please keep it straight up. I'm then going to, with that one selected, change the standard view from front to top. You may or may not need to adjust these lines here to close in here, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the views start and end at the same spot, and you can see all these various corners line up that should. We're going to place them about in this distance. So if you need to, you might need to carefully move it a little bit more. We want plenty of space in between for our dimensioning. I'm going to click this again, Control, click and hold both things, pull straight out to the side, do not pull at an angle, let go, change front in this drawing to right. So I have the top and the right side. And they are set up in a way that if I was to grab this block looking at it from the front and turn it to the right, this is what I would see. If I grab this block and turned it to look at the top, this is exactly what I should see, and everything's lined up and square. Do not rush this. Setting up the views is something that you get points for. It's about 20% of the grade. Also, we're going to make what's called an isometric view. It's a 3D cool looking view that we're going to put up in the corner. So I'm going to hold Control. This is the only one where it doesn't matter what angle I put this at. So I'm going to kind of drop that up there, and I'm going to change a few settings here. I'm going to go ahead and change the standard view to ISO, which gives me the 3D view. I know it's cutting it off right now, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut the size in half. So right now it's full size or 1:1, and I'm going to change the scale to 1/2:1. So it's half as big as these. If these were 1/2:1, I would make this 1/4:1. If these were 1/4:1, I would make this 1/8:1, and so on. So this view is always half as big as the rest. Now that I've set it at ISO and scaled it properly, I can size up the window. And again, we're going to put it up near the corner, giving ourselves plenty of space again for dimensioning. Now the last thing we're going to do is we want this to stand out a little bit. So we're going to click over to Styles. We're going to go to the Styles menu, scroll down to Default Styles, and find the one that says Shaded. And go ahead and click that one. It'll shade it in, and it'll make it look nice when it prints, and all the different faces are kind of these different shades of gray. This looks pretty good, but now we need to add the information. So the dimensioning tool is up top right here. Now dimensions are important, but you need to make sure you're not over dimensioning. What I mean by that is, I'm going to go ahead and we actually have some settings to make. So let me back up. I got the dimensioning tool. I have to come down under dimension style. Right now it says length architectural. I want to change that to decimal, which then allows me under where it now says inches to change that to millimeters. Right now it's adding a lot of decimal places. We didn't measure things that precisely. Change that please to where it just says 1 millimeter. So it's going to round to the nearest millimeters, which will be nice and forgiving for those of you who got close or may not get exactly where you need to with your dimension lines. So I'm going to click the top and click the bottom here, which tells me that mine is 50 millimeters tall. I am not going to say the height of the object again. I'm not going to put it over here. Okay, that's the same information. We're cluttering the drawing. I'm also not going to go to a different view and give you that same measurement. Okay, doesn't mean we don't use the same number. For example, from here to here is also 50 millimeters. But those are not the same dimension. This is the height of the object. This is the width of this section. So I'm not going to tell you the overall height again. However, I will tell you the heights of other objects. For example, we want to know what the height of this protrusion is, what the height of this section is, and it does automatically do this, which is fine. But I'm not going to do this top one, because again, if I took 15 plus the 15 up here plus 20, like that would be the same as writing 50 again. So I'm not going to add that one up there. I am, however, going to add some dimensions here, as well as this one. And I don't need to, but I could. I don't need to do an overall because, again, 25 plus 50 is 75, plus 10 is 85. I can figure that out very easily. My depth measurement I can add either here, or I also could have, and this is where you have to be careful. This is also the depth. I know it's not the same direction on your drawing, but when you look at the object, I put this dimension twice on this same line right there. Okay, that's not what we want to do. So I'm going to go ahead, since I already have 2 dimensions on this view, I'm going to go ahead and eliminate that one. The last dimension that I have to put is I do have to show the height of this. I'm sorry, I grabbed the wrong tool. Dimension tool. Height of this and the depth of this. Now both of these are what we call less than ideal dimensions. Their placement is outside of the area between the views. However, there's not really anywhere else we can show the depth of this part other than putting the dimension out here. Same with the height of this protrusion. So while we prefer to put the dimensions in between, sometimes we have to go to the outside. Okay, you should space your views so that you can put the dimensions towards the inside. If there's a feature you absolutely have to dimension from the outside, you can do so. But dimensioning this out here where there would have been another option, that would lose you points. For example, if I moved my right side in too close to the front and decided I'll put the 50 millimeters on the outside, that would be unnecessary because I should be able to scoot my view over and put it in there so it's between the views. Because again, this height also corresponds to this, which is why we lined everything up. The last part of preparing a drawing is the title block at the bottom. Make sure that as you put your name in here, that you put it in all capital letters, and that you include your first and last name. The drawing name should be the name of the block, Block A. Fill in your class period. And the nice part is that since we scaled all of our drawings with dimensions to be full size, my labeled scale is currently correct. If I had shrunk these down to 1/2 to 1, I would have had to change this to 1 to 1 equals 1. However, there is a problem with it. You might have picked it up by now. Units. This scale is telling everybody else that we're measuring in inches, so things don't quite make sense. So what I do have to do, since we're using a metric scale, is change the inches to millimeters in both parts. Because 1 to 1 is a ratio, a scale includes the units. So you do need to change that. But this is your completed drawing and is now ready to be printed.